The room was quiet, broken only by the faint hum of the ceiling fan, when Michael's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He reached absent-mindedly, half asleep, expecting another harmless work notification. The screen lit up, and a single preview line from a message froze his breath. Emma whispered in the dark, asking softly if everything was okay, but he could not answer. His pulse quickened as the words sank in, unraveling the comfort of the room around him. He scrolled with shaking hands, each word cutting deeper into the trust he thought unbreakable. "I miss you already," the message read, signed with a name that stabbed him like a knife. David, his colleague. His mind screamed, but his voice faltered as he whispered, "No, this can't be." Emma stirred uneasily beside him, pretending to sleep, her lips tightening at the sound of his ragged breath. The silence was suffocating, heavier than any scream. Michael's world cracked in that instant, and the warm glow of the phone's light turned into the cruel spotlight of betrayal. The life he trusted collapsed in seconds, leaving only the cold sting of truth. Michael's breathing grew shallow, as the echo of David's name carved itself deeper into his chest. He replayed the memory of yesterday's office chatter, the friendly laugh Emma shared when David walked by. The puzzle pieces, once scattered, began to align in cruel precision. He remembered late nights justified by extra work, the sudden, secretive phone calls, and the look of guilt she never thought he'd catch. His heart begged for denial, but the evidence refused mercy. "Why him?" he whispered, the sound barely audible in the heavy room. He turned toward Emma, searching her still figure for a crack in the mask. She shifted slightly, her hand pressed tighter to her chest, as though guarding the secret within. His rage fought against heartbreak, every second louder inside his head. The quiet room now felt like a battlefield, charged with betrayal and silence sharper than any scream. The message haunted Michael as he stared blankly at the screen, his mind spiraling. Each word was a hammer blow to his trust. He thought about the years sacrificed, the love invested, the loyalty given so freely. His chest felt heavy, as though every breath was borrowed. He turned the phone off abruptly, darkness swallowing the glow, but the words still burned in his head. Emma shifted again, lips parting as if she might speak, but silence ruled the night. Michael clenched his fists, trying to hold together a life that had already shattered. His voice cracked as he muttered, "I gave you everything." The words dissolved in the thick air, unanswered and unwanted. A storm brewed inside him, silent but destructive, ready to spill into the light of day. The clock ticked endlessly, each second mocking him with cruel rhythm. Michael's thoughts tangled between fury and despair. He replayed their conversations, the reassurances she had given, the warmth that now felt hollow. The betrayal was not just of his heart, but of his dignity, his trust, and his world. Emma turned over at last, feigning drowsiness, whispering, "Can't you sleep?" Her voice was soft, but Michael heard the lie within it. He wanted to scream, but his throat locked tight with rage. "I know," he whispered back, the words sharp and heavy. Emma froze, her eyes flickering open, a facade cracking under the weight of his truth. The silence that followed was darker than the night itself. The stillness shattered when Emma sat up abruptly, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" Michael's eyes burned as he held the phone in his hand, his knuckles white. He thrust it toward her, the glowing words piercing both of them. Her lips parted, but no sound came, her face pale beneath the dim light. "With him?" Michael demanded, his voice shaking with rage and heartbreak. The truth, undeniable and merciless, filled the room like poison. Emma reached for him, but he pulled away, his chest heaving. The fragile silence between them was gone, replaced by a storm of betrayal that could never be undone. The night that began with restless sleep had now become the night their world collapsed. The silence lingered long after the first confrontation, heavy enough to crush Michael's chest. He wandered into the living room, pacing back and forth, replaying every tender moment that now felt like a cruel performance. His heart trembled as he remembered the night Emma had promised forever, the laughter they once shared, and the warmth of her embrace. Now each memory felt poisoned. He collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling, whispering, "Was it all a lie?" The weight of betrayal consumed him, leaving only fragments of trust scattered across the floor of his mind. His tears came silently, hidden behind clenched fists, but his pain echoed louder than any scream. Emma hovered in the hallway, her eyes red but her face still composed, uncertain whether to approach or retreat. Michael felt her presence but turned away, too broken to let her voice reach him. Michael's thoughts drifted to the beginning, when everything felt pure. He remembered their first date, how Emma had smiled under the soft glow of a cafe's lights, her laughter echoing like music. That memory, once his anchor, now felt hollow. How could she trade this for him? He muttered. His chest ached, torn between love and fury, between longing and disgust. Emma stepped closer, whispering, "I never wanted to hurt you." Her voice trembled, but her words only deepened the wound. Michael looked at her with eyes that carried years of devotion now scorched with disbelief. He wanted to believe her, but the name on the screen had already burned trust to ash. The air between them was charged, fragile, and suffocating, threatening to shatter with every heartbeat. Emma inched closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand." Michael laughed bitterly, a sound more broken than cruel. "Then make me understand," he snapped, his words sharp like shattered glass. The room fell into stillness again, the ticking clock mocking them. Michael's chest heaved as he stared at her, the woman he once thought would never break him. His voice cracked as he said, "Every sacrifice, every promise, did it mean nothing to you?" Emma lowered her gaze, unable to meet his eyes. Her silence was the answer he dreaded most, louder than confession, heavier than denial. Michael's body slumped further into despair, his strength collapsing under the weight of the truth. Michael rose from the couch abruptly, his movements sharp with restless energy. He walked to the window, pulling back the curtain, staring at the quiet street below. "Everyone thinks we're perfect," he muttered bitterly, his reflection fractured in the glass. Emma stepped closer, her voice shaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Michael's shoulders stiffened, and his hands pressed hard against the window frame. The night outside felt colder, darker, reflecting the storm inside him. He whispered, "You destroyed us." Emma's lips quivered, but no words followed. The silence was more devastating than any excuse. Michael closed his eyes, unable to bear the sight of her shadow lingering behind him. The weight of the night pressed harder with every passing second. Michael turned from the window, his eyes hollow but fierce. "Do you love him?" he asked, the question slicing through the air. Emma froze, her breath caught, her face pale as if the walls themselves had caved in. Michael's chest rose and fell with raw desperation as he waited. She stammered, unable to answer, and in that silence, Michael's world shattered further. He shook his head, whispering, "That silence is louder than the truth." Emma's tears finally spilled, but to Michael they felt meaningless, too late, too shallow. The living room that once held love now drowned in betrayal's shadow, and Michael knew nothing would ever be the same again. The morning sun crept through the blinds, but the light felt harsh, unwelcoming. Michael sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of cold coffee, his hands trembling. His mind replayed Emma's silence, her inability to deny or confess. The weight of betrayal followed him like a shadow he could not shake. His phone buzzed again, the name David flashing across the screen, and his stomach twisted with rage. He hesitated, his thumb hovering before pressing decline with force. Emma entered slowly, her eyes tired, her body wrapped in guilt like a cloak. She whispered his name, but Michael's jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on the dark liquid in front of him. "Don't," he muttered, his voice hoarse but sharp. The distance between them was more than space. It was a chasm filled with broken trust. Michael's phone buzzed again, this time with a message preview. He didn't want to read it, but his eyes betrayed him. "Meet me at lunch," she once suspect, the words burned into his memory. His hand clenched so tightly the phone case cracked slightly. He looked up at Emma, who shifted nervously, her body stiff with hidden guilt. Michael's chest rose with fury as he slammed the phone on the table. "Do you even realize how obvious this is?" he asked, his tone shaking the fragile morning silence. Emma's lips parted, but her voice collapsed before forming words. Her silence once again screamed louder than denial. Michael's heart thundered, rage mixing with unbearable grief. The cracks in their home were no longer invisible. Michael rose from the table, his chair scraping harshly across the floor. He stormed toward the hallway, words spilling like fire. "I gave you every piece of me, and you threw it away." Emma followed slowly, whispering, "It wasn't supposed to happen." Her words ignited his fury further. He spun, eyes blazing, and shouted, "Then why him? Why the one man I have to see every day?" The mention of David's name hung heavy in the air, poisoning the space between them. Emma's shoulders slumped, her body trembling, her guilt unspoken but visible. Michael's chest heaved with the unbearable weight of betrayal, his voice breaking as he muttered, "You've destroyed everything." The hallway echoed with the sound of his ragged breath. Later that day, Michael sat in his car outside the office, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He thought about walking inside, facing David as though nothing had changed. But the thought burned him alive. His reflection in the windshield showed hollow eyes, a man broken by truth. "He knew," Michael whispered bitterly, imagining David's smirk. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It invaded his workplace, his sense of safety. He considered confronting David, but the idea of public exposure felt unbearable. He leaned back in his seat, head pressed against the rest, eyes closed as rage boiled under the surface. The office loomed ahead like a cruel reminder of everything he had lost. When Michael finally entered the office, the walls felt suffocating. Every laugh, every passing glance seemed suspicious, as if everyone already knew his secret shame. His heart pounded when he saw David by the coffee machine, smiling easily as though life were untouched. The sight twisted Michael's stomach, and his fists clenched. David looked up briefly, their eyes meeting, and Michael swore he saw recognition in his smirk. His pulse thundered as he forced himself to walk past, teeth grinding, rage boiling beneath his skin. The betrayal wasn't just at home, it stalked him here too, poisoning every corner of his life. Michael's heart raced as he sifted through his desk drawer at work, looking for a file but finding something far more damning. A crumpled note slid out, handwritten in Emma's script, her words clear, "Lunch tomorrow, don't let Michael notice." His hands shook as the ink burned into his eyes, proof that pierced deeper than whispers and glances. He closed the drawer slowly, his body rigid, the office around him fading into silence. David's laugh echoed from across the room, and it felt like a dagger twisting in his chest. The betrayal was no longer suspicion, but undeniable truth. Michael's lips quivered as he whispered, "It was you all along." His vision blurred with rage and heartbreak, every beat of his pulse hammering louder. Later that afternoon, Michael stood frozen outside the conference room, hearing voices that made his blood boil. He recognized Emma's soft tone, carried through the thin walls, followed by David's low laugh. His chest constricted as their words drifted out. "He doesn't suspect a thing," David said smugly. Emma's reply was quieter, but it tore Michael apart. "I can't keep lying much longer." Michael's hands pressed hard against the wall, his knuckles white, every muscle locked in rage. His mind screamed as reality twisted into something unbearable. The colleague he once trusted most and the woman he loved most stood united in betrayal, just feet away. Michael pushed open the conference room door suddenly, the heavy sound breaking their laughter into silence. Emma's face drained of color, her lips parting as shock flooded her expression. David's smirk faltered, replaced by a mask of false calm. Michael's eyes burned as he held the crumpled note in his trembling hand. "Was this your plan all along?" he demanded, his voice shaking with fury. The silence weighed thick as Emma stammered, unable to form words, and David shifted uneasily in his chair. Every ounce of betrayal stood exposed in that room, and Michael felt his world unravel before his eyes. The confrontation ignited like fire, Michael's voice trembled but was relentless. "How long?" he asked, his eyes darting between Emma and David. Emma's tears welled as she whispered, "Months." The word shattered him, heavier than a blade. David tried to speak, but Michael cut him off with a roar. "You sit across from me every day and do this?" His chest heaved with disbelief, his face wet with tears he no longer cared to hide. The office, once his place of focus and pride, had become a stage for his humiliation. The truth was no longer hiding in shadows. It stood bare before him, merciless and cruel. Michael's body trembled as silence settled again, his rage draining into hollow despair. Emma sobbed quietly, unable to meet his gaze, while David looked away, shame creeping into his face. Michael pressed both hands on the table, leaning forward as his voice broke. "You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything I believed in." His words carried more weight than any scream, echoing in the sterile office air. He stepped back, his breath ragged, eyes burning with both fury and heartbreak. "I see you both for who you really are now." The finality in his tone silenced them, leaving a void that no apology could ever fill. Michael's voice roared through the conference room, his fury no longer restrained. "Do you even know what you've taken from me?" His chest heaved, every word dripping with rage and sorrow. Emma sobbed quietly, her hands pressed to her face, unable to defend herself. David stood firm, though his eyes flickered with guilt, his silence a shield he could not drop. Michael slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing like thunder across the sterile office. "You looked me in the eye every day," he shouted at David, "and you lie." The betrayal bled through every syllable, each word fueled by the unbearable weight of shattered trust. David finally spoke, his voice low but defensive. "It just happened," he muttered, trying to sound composed. Michael's laugh cracked into the air, bitter and broken. "It didn't just happen," he snapped, pointing a trembling hand at him. "You chose this." Emma cried harder, whispering, "Stop, please." But Michael's pain drowned out her plea. His teeth clenched as he stepped closer to David, their faces nearly colliding, the tension electric. "You betrayed me in my home, in my life, in my work," Michael said, his voice trembling with rage. The room felt smaller, suffocating, filled with the heat of their clash. Michael's body shook as his fury boiled over, but beneath it lay crushing heartbreak. He turned to Emma, his voice breaking. "I loved you more than anything." His words trembled with both devotion and devastation. Emma's tears streamed as she reached out, whispering, "I made a mistake." Michael jerked away, his body rigid, his voice raw. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, not destroying a marriage." His pain cut through the room like glass. He felt as though the walls themselves carried the weight of his grief, pressing closer with every heartbeat. The moment spiraled into chaos as Michael's fury erupted fully. He grabbed his chair, shoving it violently aside, the sound screeching through the room like a scream. "Everything I built with you is gone," he shouted, his voice filled with despair. Emma collapsed into the chair beside her, sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in her hands. David stepped forward cautiously, as if to speak, but Michael spun on him with eyes blazing. "Don't you dare say a word." The storm inside him poured into the room, unstoppable and unforgiving, the climax of betrayal striking like a final blow. Finally, Michael's rage drained, leaving only exhaustion and despair. His chest rose and fell in heavy breaths, his eyes red and hollow. He looked at Emma, her tears soaking her face, then at David, his silence weighed down with guilt. "You've both taken everything from me," Michael whispered, his voice nearly gone. He pushed away from the table, his body trembling, his soul shattered. The confrontation had left him stripped bare, no more denial, no more questions. His truth lay in ruins before him, and nothing could ever rebuild it. The climax of betrayal had been spoken, and silence swallowed the wreckage. Michael left the conference room, his body heavy, his spirit broken. The office lights felt harsh against his tired eyes, as whispers trailed behind him. He walked down the hallway, each step echoing his defeat. His mind replayed Emma's words, David's silence, every truth that had shattered his world. He stopped near the elevator, staring at his reflection in the mirrored doors, seeing a man unrecognizable to himself. His shoulders slumped, his face pale and drained of life. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he whispered, his voice breaking under the weight of despair. The betrayal was no longer a wound, but an identity forced upon him, carved deep into his soul. That night, Michael sat alone in his living room, the silence overwhelming. The house that once carried laughter now felt hollow, every corner tainted by betrayal. He stared at a family photo on the wall, his fingers tracing the frame as tears blurred his vision. Emma's face smiled back at him from the captured memory, and rage flared before collapsing into grief. He whispered to himself, "I gave everything." The sound of his own voice in the empty room was both strange and crushing. The betrayal was not just a moment. It was a fracture that split time in two, before and after. Emma sat alone in the bedroom, her face buried in her hands. Her tears fell onto the blanket as the weight of her choices pressed harder with every second. She whispered into the empty room, "I ruined everything." Her voice cracked, filled with regret, yet the silence gave no comfort. The distance between her and Michael felt infinite, though he was only a room away. She longed to reach out, to take back the pain she had caused, but she knew the damage was irreparable. Her sobs echoed softly, fading into the dark night that swallowed her hope. Michael stood outside on the porch, staring at the quiet street. The night air was cool, but inside he burned with a storm of pain and exhaustion. His chest rose and fell slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. He whispered, "I have nothing left to give." The stars above felt distant, indifferent to his suffering, while the silence of the street mirrored his isolation. For the first time he felt truly alone, stripped of love, trust and stability. His eyes watered, but no tears fell. He was too drained, too broken. The night was his only witness. The following morning, Michael packed a small bag, his movements slow and deliberate. He folded shirts without thought, his eyes blank, his body numb. Emma watched silently from the doorway, her face streaked with tears, but she said nothing. The sound of the zipper closing echoed louder than words. Michael lifted the bag, his shoulders sagging, and walked past her without looking back. "Goodbye," he whispered, his voice hollow and final. Emma's lips trembled, but the silence remained unbroken. The home they once shared was no longer theirs. It was a graveyard of trust, a place haunted by betrayal. Michael walked through the city streets at dawn, the world around him waking to a new day, while his own life felt ended. He moved slowly, his bag heavy on his shoulder, his steps uncertain. The betrayal still throbbed inside him, but with every block he put between himself and the past, he felt a fragile sense of release. He whispered, "I will not break," his voice soft but determined. The pain would not vanish, but he knew he had to keep walking, even with scars that would never heal. Emma sat alone at the dining table, the morning light spilling across her tear-streaked face. Her hands trembled as she held her phone, staring at Michael's contact, but she couldn't bring herself to call. She whispered into the silence, "I destroyed him." The house was silent, stripped of warmth, now a prison of regret. She knew she had lost not only his love, but the life they had built together, and no words could rebuild what she had shattered. At the office, David leaned against his desk, his usual confidence gone. He stared at the computer screen but saw nothing, his thoughts consumed by guilt. The laughter of colleagues nearby felt unbearable, every sound a reminder of his betrayal. He whispered under his breath, "What have I done?" The affair had given him nothing but shame, and now he stood in the ruins of two broken lives. The weight of his choices pressed down harder than he had ever imagined. Michael sat on a park bench, the city alive around him, but his world still felt quiet. Children played in the distance, laughter carried on the breeze. A sound that once brought him joy now felt bittersweet. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, letting the air steady him. For the first time since the truth broke, he felt the faintest spark of calm. He whispered, "I'll survive this." The scars would remain, but survival was enough for now. That night, Michael stood at the window of a small rented apartment, the city lights glowing below. His reflection stared back, not the man he once was, but someone forged in fire and heartbreak. He whispered, "You didn't think I'd ever find out, did you?" The words cut the silence, a final declaration of the pain that had shaped him. Behind his hollow eyes burned quiet strength, the promise that though betrayed, he would rise again. The betrayal was his ending, but also the beginning of something new.